So just in case it was hard to understand those videos because they were just all broken up, I decided I would just really quick send you the, like, how to figure out the blood gases, just so that you have like one thing in one place that you can go back and listen to. So I am referencing her worksheet, Chris's worksheet that she has up. The first problem, so that you make sure you have the correct worksheet. The first one is a pH of 7.33, CO2 of 51, and an HCO3 or bicarb of 29. So just making sure that you're following along here. So first and foremost, what I do at the beginning of all of these problems is when I get the test, I take my scratch paper and I write down the normals. So 7.35, 7.45, 35 to 45 for the CO2, and 22 to 26 for the HCO3 or bicarb. So first and foremost, write your normals and understand that if the pH is lower than 7.35, that is considered acidic. If it's greater than 7.45, it's considered alkaline. And the second thing I do is I write Rome, R-O, and then a big line and M-E. And this is in regards to the arrows that you're going to write, whether it's arrows or a dash, a straight line dash for normal. Rome has everything to do with the direction of your arrows. RO is respiratory opposite arrows. Metabolic is equal for your ME. So if you see any arrows at all in the three, you don't group them by pairs and then see what the other one's doing. Like, no, you just look at all three arrows or dashes as a whole. If you see any direction differences between the arrows at all, even though two might go the same way and one goes the other way, that is opposite. If you have any discrepancy in the same direction of those arrows, it is opposite. So that is respiratory, because R and O go together and M and E go together. If all of those arrows are all pointing up or all pointing down, all three of them, it has to be all three, then that is ME, which is equal, which is metabolic. So ROME. So get your paper, write your normals, and then write Rome. And then you need to do your arrows or your dashes, okay? So you start with pH, you see what that number is. Is it high, low, or normal? Okay, normal is a dash. So just the third step is just writing your arrows and dashes. So if your pH is low, you need to do an arrow down. If it's high, you need to do an arrow up. If it's normal, you need to do a dash and stop right there and write FC for fully compensated on your paper. Because fully compensated means that your pH is normal, and then you need to write a little arrow. Is it on the low or acidic end of normal, or is it on the high or alkaline side of normal? So do your dash, figure out if it's on the high or low end of normal, and then right there, write fully compensated on your paper. That is the very first thing you need to do if you notice that your pH is normal. Then you move on to your other arrow, your CO2. Is it high, low, or normal? And then same with your HCO3. Is it high, low, or normal? So then you look at everything as a whole and you see, are any of the three of those arrows, are they all the same, all three of them? If they're all the same direction, you can write metabolic on your paper, okay? If they're all, low, you can also write metabolic, because all three of them have to be equal in order for it to be metabolic, okay? If you have any discrepancy in your arrows, one's pointing down, two's pointing up, maybe you have a down, up, down, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. If there's any differences in directions of all three, not just two, all three, then it's respiratory, because respiratory is opposite. And then you need to understand what it means when either the CO2 or the HCO3 is either normal with a dash or it's high or low, okay? Because that means if you have like your pH is like down or whatever, and your CO2 is up and then your HCO3 is up, if you're seeing directional changes between the CO2 or the HCO3 at all, like one of them is not normal, then that means you have compensation going on of some sort, because that other value, it doesn't matter which one, What it's dumbed down in meaning is that if its level is also not normal, so both of those CO2 and the HCO3, neither of them are normal, then that means that one of them is compensating for the lack in the other one. So I look at that as saying like the other one is compensating or sacrificing its own normal level of 35 to 45 or 22 to 26. It is compensating its own normal level by coming in and sacrificing itself to try to get things back to normal. So if you see one of those two, whether it be CO2 or HCO3, and you're getting a dash line right there, you should know right there that it's not compensated. It's NC. They're not doing anything to help because it's in the normal range. It's not compensating its normal level to come in and help. So if you see, like I said, a dash in either one of those two when you're doing your arrows, you should stop right there and write NC for not compensated, because again, it's not sacrificing itself. It's saying, no, you figure this out on your own. I can't come in here and help. Now, if you see a dash in your pH and only your pH, you need to put a dash there because it's normal, but then you need to put a little arrow and tell me if it's on the low end of normal or the high end of normal. You don't do that with your dash line in the CO2 or HCO3 because we don't care, is it on the high or low end of normal for those? We don't care. All we care about with CO2 and HCO3, if it's normal, that just means that it's not coming in to help. It's not sacrificing itself. So it's NC. It's not compensated. And then based on that, then you just need to look at the direction of all of your arrows and figure out, is it respiratory or is it metabolic? And then based on your pH, you'll find out, is it respiratory acidosis, respiratory alkalosis, metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis? It doesn't matter. It's super easy. You just first and foremost need to know your normals. You need to do Rome. You need to move on to your pH and figure out, is it normal? Okay, it is normal. Great. I'm going to write fully compensated. Is it on the high or low end of normal? Okay, great. I'm going to write acidotic or alkalotic after I write fully compensated. Then you need to move on to your other arrows. Is your CO2 high, low, or normal? Is your HCO3 high, low, or normal? And remember that if one of the two of those is normal, you can stop right there and write NC, not compensated. But if they're both abnormal, then you know that there's compensation going on, partial compensation, because that other one is sacrificing its normal level to come in and help. So I would begin, like I said, do your normals up at the top, write your Rome, then move on with your arrows. If you're seeing any dash lines, you need to write your compensation, according to that. Is it, fully compensation in the pH, or is it not compensated because maybe you have a normal or a dash line in your CO2 or HCO3? And then from there, you need to figure out the direction of your arrows. And after you do that, it should make total sense. So just to run through a couple examples, I'll do the first one. So 7.33, so you need to first of all write your normals on the top of your page along with Rome, and then write 7.33, 51 for CO2, and HCO3 is 29. So write those three. And then 7.33, you should be writing an arrow down, 51 for your CO2, which should be an arrow up, and 29 for your bicarb should be an arrow up. So the first thing you should notice right there is that even though those two arrows at the end are both pointing up, it doesn't matter because you have one going the other way. So right there, you have opposites going on. So it's respiratory because you have opposite arrows. Then you should know that it's acidotic because that's what a low arrow means in the pH. So it's respiratory acidosis. And then you can see that the HCO3 is also abnormal because we said that was high. So that must mean that compensation's going on because they're sacrificing their normal level of 22 to 26 to come in and raise it and try to help out what's going on. So it would be respiratory acidosis with no compensation if the HCO3 had a dash or was normal. The kidneys are saying, no, I'm not going to sacrifice or compensate myself to help you. You're good. You do it yourself. But no, he's saying I need to get my level out of whack. I'm going to compensate myself or sacrifice my normal level to try to come in and help. So that is partially compensated. And then you have kind of the same situation going on in the second one, but it's metabolic alkalosis. So these top two are really easy. So your second one there, so write down 7.49, 51, and 29. So it's just the opposite as far as respiratory and then acidotic. It's just the opposite, because with 7.49, you know that's high, so do an arrow up. Your CO2 is high, so do an arrow up. And then your bicarb is high, so do an arrow up. So the first thing you should see there is 3 arrows going all the same way. So you'll know right there that it must be metabolic because they're all equal, ME, according to Rome. And then you'll know that it's alkalotic because you have 7.49, so that's on the high end, right? It's still not normal, you know, it's still high, so it's alkalotic. And then it's partially compensated because the other one is abnormal as well. Because when it's metabolic, it's all about the pH and the HCO3, remember, because that's the kidneys. CO2 is respiratory. So you'll see that, you know, the respiratory level, CO2, is also abnormal, coming in, trying to help, you know, compensating or sacrificing its own normal level, which should be a dash there, but it's not, because he's sacrificing himself to try to help. So you'll know it's partially compensated because the other one is not normal. Okay? So just the opposite then, let's do a no compensation going on. So try down there at the very bottom, write down 7.29, 48 for the CO2, and 26 for the bicarb. So according to your arrows, you're going to do an arrow down for the pH, you're going to do an arrow up for the CO2, and you're going to do a dash for the bicarb or HCO3. So right there, the first thing I would write, since we have a dash in one of those two as far as CO2 and HCO3, I'm going to write no compensation on my paper because I see that one of them is not coming in to help. So their level is normal, so they are not compensating for anything. That's the first thing I would write. I see a dash in one of those two, not the pH though, that's a different thing. I see a dash in one of the two as far as a CO2 or an HCO3, so I know right there there's no compensation going on. He's not sacrificing his level. His level is normal. He's telling them to figure it out themselves. So then 7.29, we said that was low, so the next thing I'd write would be that it's acidotic, okay? And I can see there that we have 2 directions of arrows going on. I see one down and one up, so I know right there it's respiratory. So it must be respiratory acidosis with no compensation because that other level is normal. So then we move into the fully compensated type of deal. So let's go like up there, write down 7.44, write down 57 for CO2, and write down 30 for HCO3 or bicarb. So as I write those down, now I'm going to do my arrows, okay? The first thing I'm doing is I'm doing a dash in the pH, so that should trigger me right there to write fully compensated because there's a dash in the pH. Then, since I know that, I need to figure out, is it on the high end of normal or the low end of normal? Because we only care about that with the pH. We don't care about dashes with the high or low end of normal in the CO2 or HCO3. That's not a thing. We just care about that in the pH. So that was normal with the dash line, and it's on the high end of normal, so the alkaline side. So I'm going to write fully compensated because I know, because there's a dash in the pH, that it's fully compensated, but it's got to be an alkalosis of some sort because it's on the high end of normal. So I'm going to write those 2 things, and then I'm going to move on. CO2, that one was high, so I'm going to do an arrow up, and HCO3 is 30, and that's also high. So we have a dash line with a little arrow on the right since it was the high end of normal for the pH. Then we have 2 more arrows up. So being that all 3 arrows are the same way, we should know that it's metabolic because they're equal. They're all going the same way. We know it's fully compensated already because we messed with that with our pH. So it should be metabolic alkalosis fully compensated. And I guess this wouldn't really matter, but just to kind of clarify what I mean about compensation going on in the first place, you should know that it's going on, some sort of compensation, because you have that other level as far as the CO2 or the HCO3. It's not a dash, remember? It's not a dash. So you know there's some kind of compensation going on because he's sacrificing his his normal level to come in and help. So you should know that there's some kind of compensation going on also. That might throw you off a little bit, but I just wanted to explain that, because no compensation just means that you have a dash in one of your CO2 or your HCO3. One of those is normal. So if you ever see a dash in one of those two, the first thing you need to write is no compensation, NC, because they're not sacrificing themselves. So that would be an example of that would be, and we might already did this one, would be like 7.30, 55 for the CO2, and 25 for the HCO3. So when you're doing your arrows, you know, your pH is low, so do an arrow down. Your CO2 is high, so do an arrow up. And then your bicarb, 25, is normal, so put a dash there. So the first thing I'm writing with that one is no compensation, because one of those two is normal. So I would first write no compensation and then move on. Okay, we know that it's acidosis because our pH is low, so then I'm writing acidosis, and then I'm seeing that those two arrows are going different ways, so then I know it's respiratory. So it's really not that hard, as long as first and foremost you know your normals, then you know Rome, and then you know what to do with dash lines. Whether if there's a dash in the pH, you need to find out if it's on the high or low end of that and write fully compensated. If there's a dash in a CO2 or the HCO3, you need to write no compensation, and we don't care if it's on the high or low end of normal. For those two, we just care that they're normal, so we know there's no compensation because they're not sacrificing themselves to help.